Let's suppose that I'm appointed special counsel at the Department of Justice. I go to the telecommunication companies, the phone companies, let's single out AT&T, and I say, look, I know you're busy, but I want to see a copy of the phone records of a sitting United States senator. They're not going to just give them to me, are they?
No, Senator, of course not.
In fact, they're probably going to ask me what planet I just parachuted in from. Phone records of a sitting. Did I mention it was a sitting United States senator? I can't remember. What do I have to show to get the phone records of a sitting United States senator?
Yes, Senator, there were actually 8 sitting United States
Yeah, I
senators.
heard that.
And you would have to have cause.
I'm sorry, what do I have to show?
You would have to have cause to get the
Good cause or
subpoena.
probable cause?
Probable cause.
Okay.
Okay, so this is absolutely explosive. Like career ending, potentially criminal, send you to prison explosive. Jack Smith just dropped evidence in court that Attorney General Pam Bondi may have destroyed or removed sensitive documents after a judge ordered their preservation. Yeah, you heard that right. The Attorney General of the United States, the nation's top law enforcement official, is being accused of obstruction of justice, of destroying evidence, of tampering with documents that were under court order. And this isn't just speculation or political mudslinging. Jack Smith has witnesses. He has testimony from DOJ staffers who say they saw Bondi frantically moving documents immediately after the court order came down. He has evidence of missing digital files. He has testimony about supervisors telling staff not to create paper trails and to only communicate in person to avoid discovery. This is a full-blown scandal, and it's happening at the highest levels of the Justice Department. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Senator, I just learned about this very recently, as did Director Patel, and we cannot discuss the details. I don't know many of the details.
Well, maybe we ought to get Attorney General Garland here. Do you know if the special counsel told FBI Director Wray? Is that something? Let me put it another way. If I were your special counsel and you were the director of the FBI, and I'm trying to get the phone records of a sitting United States senator, did I mention it was a sitting United States senator? Is that something that you would expect me to tell you as director of the FBI?
In general, I would believe the FBI would help execute the subpoena.
So let's set the scene. There's been a court case, one of Jack Smith's cases against Trump or Trump administration officials, and the judge in that case issued an order for full disclosure, told the DOJ to turn over all relevant documents, standard discovery stuff. The government has to provide evidence to the other side. That's how the legal process works. But according to the evidence Smith just presented, instead of complying with that order, Bondi and others at the DOJ allegedly started destroying evidence, moving documents, deleting files, doing everything they could to prevent certain information from being disclosed. And that obstruction of justice, that's a crime. And if it's proven, it could send people to prison. Now, the evidence is damning. Jack Smith presented testimony from whistleblowers inside the DOJ, people who worked there, people who were told to participate in this cover-up and are now coming forward. And what they're describing is systematic destruction of evidence. Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing Bondi and DOJ staff removing documents after the judge ordered their preservation. Not before, after. They knew there was a court order. They knew the documents were supposed to be preserved, and they removed them anyway. That's not a mistake. That's not an accident. That's deliberate obstruction. And it gets worse. Former staffers testified that they witnessed files being deleted, digital files just disappearing from DOJ systems. And they were instructed not to create paper trails. Supervisors were telling them, don't put anything in writing, have meetings in person, don't send emails, don't create any records that could be discovered later. That's consciousness of guilt. That's what people do when they know they're doing something wrong and they're trying to hide it. And the fact that this was happening at the Department of Justice, the institution responsible for enforcing the law, is absolutely stunning. Legal analysts are saying this is really hard to defend because destroying evidence after a court order is one of the most clear-cut examples of obstruction you can have. There's no ambiguity. There's no reasonable interpretation where this is okay. A judge says preserve the documents, you preserve the documents. If you destroy them instead, you're committing a crime. And if you're the Attorney General and you're doing this, you're not just committing a crime, you're betraying your oath of office. You're using your position as the nation's top law enforcement official to obstruct justice. That's about as serious as it gets, and the judge is not happy. According to reports from the courtroom, the judge looked at this evidence and said, "This looks like obstruction, and there will be consequences if you're hiding evidence." That's a direct warning. The judge is telling Bondi and the DOJ, you're in serious trouble here. You better come clean, and you better do it fast, because if you continue to hide evidence, if you continue to obstruct, I'm going to hold you in contempt. I'm going to refer you for criminal prosecution. I'm going to make sure there are consequences. And those consequences could be massive. We're not just talking about civil penalties or professional discipline. We're talking about potential criminal charges against the Attorney General, against other high-ranking DOJ officials. If an independent special counsel is appointed to investigate this, if they find that Bondi and others knowingly destroyed evidence after a court order, those people could go to prison. This is not a joke. This is not political theater. This is people potentially facing serious felony charges. And there's another layer to this, because the evidence Smith presented also suggests that Trump personally directed Bondi to use DOJ resources for political revenge, that Trump was telling the Attorney General to go after his enemies, to use the power of the Justice Department to settle political scores. And if that's true, if there's evidence of Trump directing the Attorney General to misuse her office, that's another scandal on top of the obstruction scandal. That's the president using the Justice Department as a personal weapon. And that's exactly the kind of thing that the DOJ is supposed to be independent from. So now you've got lawmakers demanding an independent investigation. Members of Congress, even some Republicans, are saying this is too serious to ignore, that if the Attorney General is accused of destroying evidence, that needs to be investigated by someone outside the DOJ, because obviously you can't have the DOJ investigating itself when the Attorney General is the one accused of wrongdoing. So there are calls for a special counsel, for an independent prosecutor who can look at this evidence, interview witnesses, and determine whether criminal charges are warranted. And the fallout is already starting. DOJ morale is apparently in the toilet. Career prosecutors are horrified that their leadership is accused of the very crimes they're supposed to be prosecuting. Some are considering resigning. Some are leaking to the press. The whole department is in crisis. And on Capitol Hill, this is becoming a major issue. Democrats are demanding hearings. They're demanding testimony from Bondi. They're demanding accountability. And even some Republicans are uncomfortable defending this. Because how do you defend an Attorney General who allegedly destroyed evidence after a court order? You can't. It's indefensible. So this is huge. This is potentially the biggest scandal yet in Trump's second term, and it's just breaking. Let's dive in. All right, so let's dig into the details of what Jack Smith actually presented in court, because the specifics matter here, and they paint a picture of systematic obstruction at the highest levels of the Justice Department. So the case. There's been litigation over Trump administration actions, one of Jack Smith's ongoing investigations or prosecutions. And as part of that case, the judge issued a discovery order. That's standard procedure. In any legal case, both sides have to turn over relevant documents to each other. It's called discovery, and the purpose is to ensure that trials are fair, that both sides have access to the evidence, and that there are no surprises. So the judge ordered the DOJ to turn over all relevant documents, and not just turn them over, but preserve them. Because once a court order for document preservation is issued, you have a legal obligation to make sure those documents aren't destroyed or altered. You have to put what's called a litigation hold in place. That means telling everyone in your organization, don't delete emails, don't shred documents, don't do anything that would destroy potential evidence. And if you violate a litigation hold, if you destroy documents after being ordered to preserve them, that's obstruction of justice. That's a crime. And according to Jack Smith's evidence, that's exactly what happened. Multiple witnesses, including DOJ employees and former employees, testified that they saw Bondi and other DOJ officials removing documents immediately after the court order came down. Not before the order, when there might have been some ambiguity about whether the documents needed to be preserved, but after they knew there was a court order, after they had a legal obligation to preserve the documents, and they removed them anyway. And when witnesses saw this happening and raised concerns, they were allegedly told to keep quiet, to not make a big deal about it, to not create any records of what was happening. And it wasn't just physical documents. Digital files were being deleted too. Multiple former staffers testified that they witnessed files being deleted from DOJ computer systems, emails disappearing, digital records being purged, and this wasn't routine file maintenance or archiving. This was targeted deletion of specific files that were likely responsive to the court order, and some of the people who were ordered to delete these files were uncomfortable with it. They knew it was wrong, and that's why they're now coming forward as whistleblowers. They're willing to testify about what they saw and what they were told to do, and here's what makes it even more damning. The supervisors at the DOJ were allegedly instructing staff not to create paper trails. They were telling people to have meetings in person instead of over email, to have phone conversations instead of text messages, to avoid creating any records that could be discovered in litigation. And why would you do that? The only reason to avoid creating records is if you're planning to do something you don't want documented. If you're planning to have conversations or make decisions that you don't want to be held accountable for later, that's consciousness of guilt. That's evidence that the people involved knew what they were doing was wrong. Now, let's talk about Pam Bondi specifically, because she's the Attorney General. She's the person ultimately responsible for the Justice Department. And according to witnesses, she was personally involved in moving documents. People saw her frantically moving files immediately after the court order. Now, Bondi's defenders might say, well, maybe she was just reorganizing. Maybe she was moving documents to a different location for legitimate reasons. But that doesn't hold water, because when there's a litigation hold in place, you don't move documents, you leave them exactly where they are, because moving them, even to another location, can be seen as tampering. It can make it harder to verify that all the documents were preserved. It can create opportunities for documents to go missing. So even if Bondi wasn't intending to destroy the documents, even if she was just moving them, that's still a problem when there's a court order in place. But the evidence suggests this was more than just moving documents. Multiple witnesses describe a frantic effort to remove documents to make them unavailable for discovery. And that goes beyond innocent reorganization. That sounds like someone trying to hide evidence. And if that's what was happening, if Bondi was directing or participating in an effort to hide evidence from the court, that's obstruction. That's a crime. And it doesn't matter that she's the Attorney General. In fact, it makes it worse, because the Attorney General is supposed to uphold the law, not break it. Now, there's another piece of evidence that Jack Smith presented, and this is really damning. There's apparently evidence that Trump personally directed Bondi to use DOJ resources for political revenge. That Trump was telling the Attorney General to investigate his enemies, to prosecute people who had crossed him, to use the power of the Justice Department to settle political scores. And if that's true, if there are communications showing Trump directing Bondi to misuse her office, that's a massive scandal, because the DOJ is supposed to be independent. The Attorney General is supposed to make prosecutorial decisions based on the facts and the law, not based on what the president wants. And this connects to the document destruction, because one reason Bondi might be trying to hide documents is if those documents show inappropriate communications with Trump. If there are emails or memos showing Trump telling Bondi to go after his enemies and Bondi agreeing to do it, those documents would be incredibly damaging. They would show that the DOJ has been politicized, that it's being used as a weapon against Trump's political opponents, and that would undermine the legitimacy of every prosecution the DOJ is involved in. So Bondi has a huge incentive to make sure those documents never see the light of day, and that might be why she and others were allegedly destroying evidence. Now, let's talk about what happens next, because this can't just be swept under the rug. The evidence is too serious, the allegations are too damning, and there's too much public attention on this now. So what are the possible outcomes? Well, first, the judge in this case could hold Bondi and others in contempt. The judge could impose sanctions, fine them, refer them for criminal prosecution. Judges have broad powers to enforce their orders, and when people destroy evidence in violation of a court order, judges take that very seriously. Second, Congress could investigate, and it looks like that's already starting to happen. Democrats are demanding hearings. They want Bondi to testify under oath about what happened. They want to see the evidence Jack Smith has gathered. They want to question the whistleblowers, and they're talking about potential impeachment, because if the Attorney General obstructed justice, that's clearly an impeachable offense. Now, whether impeachment would actually succeed in a divided Congress is a different question, but the fact that it's being discussed shows how serious this is. Third, and most significantly, there could be an independent investigation. Multiple lawmakers, including some Republicans, are calling for the appointment of a special counsel to investigate these allegations, because obviously the DOJ can't investigate itself. You can't have DOJ lawyers investigating whether the Attorney General committed crimes. That's an impossible conflict of interest. So you need someone from outside, an independent prosecutor who can gather evidence, interview witnesses, and make a determination about whether criminal charges are warranted. And if a special counsel is appointed, Bondi is in serious trouble, because a special counsel would have broad investigative powers. They could subpoena documents, they could compel testimony, they could follow the evidence wherever it leads. And if that evidence shows that Bondi destroyed documents after a court order, she could be indicted. And here's the thing about obstruction charges. They're often easier to prove than the underlying conduct you're investigating. Like, it might be hard to prove that Bondi was misusing her office to go after Trump's enemies. That requires showing corrupt intent, proving that prosecutions were politically motivated, which can be complex. But proving that she destroyed documents after a court order, that's straightforward. You just need to show that there was a court order, that she knew about it, and that she destroyed the documents anyway. And Jack Smith apparently has witnesses who can testify to all of those things, so an obstruction charge could be very solid. All right, let's break this down into the key points you need to understand. Point number 1, Jack Smith presented evidence that Pam Bondi and other DOJ officials may have destroyed documents after a judge ordered their preservation. That's obstruction of justice. That's a federal crime. And if proven, it could result in criminal charges, prison time, and the end of Bondi's career. This is not a minor scandal. This is potentially career-ending and freedom-ending for everyone involved. Point number 2, multiple witnesses, including DOJ employees and former employees, testified that they saw Bondi and others frantically moving documents immediately after the court order. These aren't anonymous sources. These are people willing to testify under oath about what they saw, and their testimony is consistent. Multiple people describing the same behavior. That's powerful evidence. That's the kind of evidence that prosecutors love because it's hard for the defense to dismiss it as the product of one disgruntled employee. Point number 3, digital files were being deleted and staff were instructed not to create paper trails. That shows systematic obstruction. That shows this wasn't just Bondi acting alone. This was a coordinated effort involving multiple people at the DOJ. And when you have systematic efforts to destroy evidence, that suggests the evidence being destroyed was really damaging, because you don't go to all that trouble to destroy evidence unless that evidence will get you in serious trouble. Point number 4, legal experts are saying this is really hard to defend because the law is clear. When a judge orders document preservation, you preserve the documents, period. There's no exception for, well, I thought they weren't that important, or I was just reorganizing. If there's a litigation hold and you destroy documents, you've obstructed justice. And the fact that Bondi is the Attorney General doesn't give her a pass. If anything, it makes it worse because she, of all people, should know better. Point number 5, the judge in the case is clearly taking this seriously. The judge warned that this looks like obstruction and that there will be consequences. Judges don't make statements like that lightly. That's the judge signaling that they're prepared to impose serious sanctions, possibly including contempt charges and criminal referrals. So Bondi can't count on the judge just letting this slide. The judge is paying attention and is prepared to take action. Point number 6, evidence suggests Trump personally directed Bondi to use DOJ resources for political revenge. If that's true, it means the DOJ's independence has been completely compromised. It means the Attorney General was taking marching orders from the president about who to investigate and prosecute. And that's a fundamental violation of how the Justice Department is supposed to operate. The DOJ is supposed to be independent. The Attorney General is supposed to make decisions based on the law and the facts, not based on the president's political desires. And if Bondi violated that principle, it undermines the legitimacy of everything the DOJ does. Point number 7, lawmakers are demanding an independent investigation, and that's appropriate because the DOJ obviously can't investigate itself. You need someone from outside who doesn't report to Bondi, who doesn't have a stake in protecting her, a special counsel who can conduct a thorough, impartial investigation, and if the evidence supports it, bring criminal charges. That's the only way to restore credibility and ensure accountability. Point number 8, DOJ morale is in crisis. Career prosecutors who have dedicated their lives to upholding the law are horrified that their leadership is accused of the very crimes they prosecute. Some are considering resigning. Some are leaking information to the press because they believe the public needs to know what's happening. And this internal crisis is going to make it even harder for the DOJ to function. Because if the people doing the work don't trust their leadership, if they believe their leadership is corrupt, the whole institution suffers. Point number 9, the obstruction allegations are potentially easier to prove than other forms of misconduct because obstruction has clear elements. Was there a court order? Did the person know about it? Did they destroy documents anyway? If the answer to all 3 questions is yes, that's obstruction. You don't have to prove complex intent or parse ambiguous communications. It's straightforward, and that makes it dangerous for Bondi, because even if she could potentially defend herself against allegations of politicizing the DOJ, the obstruction charge might be impossible to beat. Point number 10, this scandal has massive implications for Trump's administration, because if the Attorney General goes down, if she's forced to resign or is indicted, Trump has to find a new Attorney General, and whoever takes that job is going to be under intense scrutiny. They're going to be asked constantly whether they're going to maintain DOJ independence or whether they're going to be another Trump loyalist willing to bend the rules. And finding someone who can get confirmed by the Senate and who's willing to take on that toxic job is going to be really hard. So where does this leave us? Well, Pam Bondi is in serious legal jeopardy. Jack Smith has presented damning evidence that she may have obstructed justice by destroying documents after a court order. Multiple witnesses are willing to testify against her. The judge is taking the allegations seriously. Lawmakers are demanding an independent investigation, and legal experts are saying this is really hard to defend. Bondi's career is on the line. Her freedom might be on the line, and the Justice Department's credibility is in tatters. The next few weeks are going to be crucial. We're going to see if a special counsel is appointed to investigate these allegations. We're going to see if the judge holds Bondi in contempt or makes criminal referrals. We're going to see if Congress holds hearings and demands testimony. And we're going to see if Bondi tries to defend herself or if she decides to resign before things get even worse. Because right now, her position looks untenable. The evidence against her looks strong, and the pressure is mounting from all sides. This is one of those moments where the system is being tested, where we're going to find out if anyone is truly above the law. Can the Attorney General of the United States destroy evidence after a court order and face no consequences? Or will there be accountability? Will there be an investigation? Will there be charges if the evidence supports it? These are fundamental questions about the rule of law, and how they're answered is going to matter, not just for this scandal, but for the future of American democracy. Because if Bondi can get away with this, if she can obstruct justice and destroy evidence and face no consequences because she's close to Trump, then we don't really have rule of law anymore. We have rule by whoever has power. But if the system holds her accountable, if an independent investigation is conducted and charges are brought if warranted, then there's still some hope that our institutions can function, that checks and balances still exist, that nobody, not even the Attorney General, is above the law. So this is a defining moment, and everyone's watching to see what happens next. Will there be accountability? Will justice be served? Or will this be another case where powerful people escape consequences? The answer is going to tell us a lot about where we are as a country, about whether our institutions are strong enough to hold even the most powerful officials accountable, and about whether we still have a functional rule of law. Stay tuned, because this story is developing rapidly. The evidence is mounting, the pressure is building, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Next time, we'll look at what a special counsel investigation would look like, what charges could potentially be brought, and what Bondi's legal defense options are. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss that deep dive into one of the biggest scandals of Trump's second term.